Imagine waking up in a world where the Cold War wasn't just a tense standoff, but it actually boiled over into a full-blown nuclear war. Scary, right? Well, we came closer to that reality than many of us realize. Today, we're going to share stories about 5 heart-stopping moments during the Cold War when the world teetered on the brink of nuclear disaster. Buckle up, because these tales might just blow your mind. 5 Cold War close calls. The United States and the Soviet Union nearly lost the Cold War more than once, not the least of which was during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. 1. Another U-2 spy plane incident. An American U-2 espionage plane took off from Alaska on October 27, 1962, just as the Cuban Missile Crisis was intensifying, headed for a routine surveillance mission close to the North Pole. Celestial navigation was supposed to be used by pilot Charles Maltby to chart his route, but, midway during the flight, the illumination of the aurora borealis, sometimes known as the Northern Lights, completely obscured his view of the night sky. Maltby quickly got significantly off course and unintentionally crossed the border into the Soviet Union because he had no visible signs to guide him. The Air Force responded by sending 2 F-102 fighters equipped with nuclear-tipped missiles to herd Maltby back to Alaska, knowing that any confrontation between the two groups of aircraft could have resulted in all-out war. However, Maltby was able to glide his U-2, which had long since run out of fuel, out of Soviet airspace before he could be intercepted. The situation in Cuba still remained precarious, so Maltby's accidental detour carried potentially disastrous consequences. Having averted disaster on 2 fronts, President John F. Kennedy and Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev would find a peaceful resolution to the Cuban Missile Crisis the following day. 2. The B-59 submarine incident. The world might have come dangerously near to nuclear war on that same day due to a small incident that occurred on a Soviet submarine. The Soviet submarine B-59, which was hiding close to the American blockade line encircling Cuba, was being targeted by depth charges launched by the U.S. destroyer USS Beale on October 27, 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The submarine's captain mistaken the charges, which were non-lethal warning shots meant to drive B-59 to the surface, for live explosives. Feeling that he was seeing the first shot fired in World War III, the captain gave an irate order to his soldiers to arm the only nuclear-tipped torpedo on the sub and get ready for combat. The miscommunication might have led to a catastrophic event if not for a backup plan requiring approval from all 3 senior officers of the submarine before launching a nuclear weapon. The second in charge of B-59, Vasily Arkhipov, declined to provide his approval, despite the Soviet captain's support. Arkhipov calmed the captain down and then coolly persuaded the other officers to surface B-59 and ask Moscow for fresh orders. Eventually, the submarine made a safe return to Russia, but it took more than 40 years for the complete story of Arkhipov's life-saving choice to surface. 3. The 1979 NORAD computer glitch. By the late 1970s, computer systems were being used by both the US and the USSR to identify potential nuclear assaults. Although the new equipment was more advanced, malfunctions and false alarms presented a new set of hazards. North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, in Colorado is home to arguably the most well-known of these mistakes. Technicians at the location were alerted urgently on November 9, 1979, to the Soviet Union's missile onslaught directed for North America. The President's Doomsday plane was ordered to take off. The U.S. Air Defense Program scrambled 10 interceptor fighter planes, and Launch Control was alerted to prepare its missiles for a counterattack, all because of their belief that a nuclear strike was imminent. The panic soon subsided after NORAD consulted its satellite data and realized the nuclear warning was little more than a false alarm. Upon further inspection, they discovered that a technician had accidentally run a training program simulating a Soviet attack on the United States. The incident sent shock waves through the international community. Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev even wrote President Jimmy Carter a letter noting the tremendous danger caused by the error, but it was not the last time a computer issue led to a nuclear scare. Computer chip failures would later lead to 3 more false alarms at NORAD in the following year. 4. The 1983 nuclear false alarm. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov oversaw Sierpikov 15, a bunker where the Soviet Union kept an eye on its satellite-based detection systems, on September 26, 1983. a warning indicating that the United States had launched 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, toward Russia shortly after midnight caused panic. The Soviets believed the United States had initiated a nuclear war, even though the warning was a false alarm caused by one of the satellites misinterpreting a glint of sunlight off clouds in Montana as a missile launch. Protocol demanded that Serpikov-15 report any signs of a missile launch to the Soviet High Command, but Petrov had a hunch the warning was an error. He knew the new satellite system was mistake-prone, and he also reasoned that any nuclear strike by the Americans would come in the form of hundreds of missiles, not just 5. With only minutes to make a decision, Petrov chose to ignore the blaring warning alarms and reported the launch as a false alarm, a move that may have averted a nuclear holocaust. The incident remained classified until after the Cold War ended, but Petrov later received several humanitarian awards for his extraordinary actions, and was even honored by the United Nations. 5. The Able Archer 83 exercise. Declassified government documents have since made public what was once a little-known NATO war game in November 1983 that almost resulted in a nuclear exchange between the US and the USSR. The exercise, called Able Archer 83, was intended to mimic the scenario in which the US would launch a nuclear strike in response to a Soviet conventional attack on Europe. While such exercises were routine during the Cold War, Able Archer was unique in that it was both a realistic and large-scale simulation. The United States deployed 19,000 troops to Europe in advance of the war game, altered its alert level to DEFCON 1, and relocated some commands to different locations, all actions that are normally reserved for times of war. The Soviets saw these moves as an exact fit to their own theories about how the Americans would prepare for a nuclear attack. They were aware that a war scenario was in progress, but they were also concerned that it might be a front for actual attack preparations. The Americans were unaware that the Soviets had quickly activated high alert and prepared their nuclear arsenal. Some units in Poland and East Germany had even started preparing their fighter jets for departure. Up until November 11th, when the Able Archer drill concluded without a hitch, they were prepared for a counterattack. It was only much later that the United States and NATO realized how close their accurate simulation of World War III had come to becoming the actual thing. Next up, dive into the shadowy world of Operation Paperclip, the secret US mission that turned Nazi scientists into American assets for the Cold War. How did it happen, and at what cost? Stay tuned to uncover the controversy behind one of history's most morally ambiguous programs. So, there you have it, 5 moments when the Cold War could have turned hot, real fast. It's a miracle we made it through without a nuclear war. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Stick around for more tales that make history anything but boring. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe for more mind-blowing stories from the past. Catch you in the next video.